Welcome to UC Collaboration, a global name in unified communication, formerly Voice Bootcamp. Hello, my name is Faisal Khan, CEO and founder of UC Collaboration. In this CCI Collaboration Self-Study Kit, we're going to focus on device mobility, part of the mobility solution of CUCM. A device mobility can be used in a multi-site environment with a centralized call processing. When a user takes a phone from one location to another location, let's say for example between Canada and Japan, when that user goes to a different location such as Japan, they usually inherit the local IP address settings in Japan. However, because the phone configuration in Call Manager is static, when they log in from Japan, they still get the time zone and various other settings that are hard-coded to their profile in Toronto or Canada. So what device mobility does allows user to roam between the site using their Cisco IP phone, either using IP communicator or wireless phone. Call Manager tracks the IP phone based on a location-specific IP address. So in order for the device mobility to work, you must remember or know the IP address of the site where the user is coming from. Call Manager will determine the physical location of the IP phone based on the IP address used by the phone. Now, based on the physical location of the IP phone, then appropriate device configuration can be applied. So if I am in Toronto today, where my main office is, where I usually log into Call Manager from, and then I all of a sudden go to Japan for 5 days, well, when I'm logging in from Japan, what's going to happen is my IP phone will get some information related to Japan, such as the time zone, local gateway, route group for that matter, location, MRGL, things like that. Because it does not make sense that if I am sitting in Japan with a time zone in my phone from Toronto, then obviously it will be quite a bit of inappropriate in terms of either logging purpose or the person that I might be calling in the wrong time, for example. So some of the issues is when I'm moving from one location to another location is that location dependent settings are set per IP phone. So there are certain settings that are hard-coded to IP phone on their particular location. A physical device location is assumed to be constant. Constant settings, for example, even if you go to different locations such as Japan, your region doesn't change, your location doesn't change, your SRST reference doesn't change, AAR group, calling source space, and so on. So these are the items that does not change. So if you are coming from different site, then and having this information that happens to be belongs to another site, then obviously you will have wrong information when you're communicating. So what device mobility does, it identifies the phone is home or remote using a physical location tag, and then use the IP subnet to decide the location of the IP phone. If the IP subnet assigned to something called device mobility group does not match the device pool of the phone, then the location is roaming. So what happens is if your home location, physical location, does not match the device pool physical location, then obviously it is considered that you are roaming. In that scenario, when mobile user roam from one site to another site, they can inherit this information, certain settings that are related to that particular site where they're logging in from. For example, if I go to Japan and my Call Manager is configured to track the IP address of Japan, then it can say, okay, if you are coming from the IP address of Japan, then you will get Japanese device pool for that time being. When you come back for your head office, then you will go back to your original settings on the fly. There is no manual intervention here. So local route group can be assigned for 911 call. So obviously when I'm in Japan and make a 911 call, I don't want the call to use my Toronto gateway. I want them to use a local Japanese gateway. Date and time group will be closer to Japan. Region such as G729 or 11, because now you're across the WAN. All these settings such as SRST, physical location, device mobility group, they will change based on the IP address. So when you're moving from one location to another location, so this is in general, in normal case, your IP phone right here is registered to this head office, and in the head office you belong to main device pool with these settings. Now you take this phone and you join in from this particular subnet. So you can configure the Call Manager saying that whenever the user is coming from this subnet 172.16.1.0, please assign them the remote device pool. So therefore, whatever the region, location, SRSD is assigned to the remote device pool, my phone will get those settings while I'm coming from that particular subnet. But when I come back to my head office from 142 subnet, then I will go back to my main device pool. So to configure device mobility, see, first thing you do is define device mobility group, and basically there's just a name. You can call it based on branch office, head office. Then you create device mobility info, which is saying that if I'm coming from this subnet, what device pool should I assign? So obviously, if you're coming from branch office subnet, assign them branch office. If you're coming from head office, assign them head office. Now you need to define a physical location. Physical location will be used to identify whether you're actually roaming or you're local, or you're either roaming to a remote site or you're in a local. So that must be done by creating a physical location and associate the physical location to the device pool. Now device mobility can be on the service parameter cluster wide by going to call manager service, go to enterprise cluster, cluster wide parameter device phone, and then select device mobility mode, set this value to on. By default it's set to off. In the device pool of the head office, you're going to select the head office device mobility group, and you're going to assign the physical location for head office. And then all the settings are of course general, that belongs to the head office device pool. So these are the configuration that you have to do for device mobility to work. Now an example. So let's take a look at an IP communicator that I have, 1001. Right now look at the time zone, 1500, whatever the time is. Go to device phone, and this is the IP communicator, and I belong to HQ device pool. Now if I look at my computer, type IP config, you notice that I belong to subnet called 172.16.1.0. So now I can tell the call manager that if I'm coming from this subnet, then I should get the device pool for site B as opposed to HQ, where my original configuration of the phone is. So first thing I gotta do is create a physical location. I'll call this HQ location. I'll create a second one, site B location. So I have two physical location, one for each site. Next step I'm going to do is create under device mobility, under service parameter, go to call manager, I'm going to search for mobility. So it's under device phone, called device mobility. Set this value to on. So save. It tells me that in order for this feature to on, I must restore the call manager service. Fair enough. So now I will go ahead and create device mobility group. We'll call this DMG HQ, and I'll create another one called DMG site B. Assume that site B is in Japan or some other country. Now I'm going to define the IP address by creating a device mobility info. I'm going to say that DM info underscore site B, because I'm right now only concerned for site B. That if I'm coming from site B, assign them site B, and the subnet mask. Yeah, that should be fine. Now pay attention, it's 1500 as you can see here. I'm going to exit from the phone. Sorry, bit, it should be in a bit, so 24 bits. So if I'm coming from this subnet, I should get this device pool with 24 bits. Save. I will then now go to device pool, go to HQ device pool first, and I'm going to assign the physical location called HQ, device mobility group called HQ. Save, and then I'm not going to reset because I'm going to reset the call manager service anyway. So side B device pool, I will do exactly the same, but with side B information. Alright, so now that my settings are done, what I'm going to do is restart the call manager service. Alright, so I'm going to see if the service is phones are registered or not. Still coming up. So while it's coming up, I'm going to open up my IP communicator. So I'm going to pretend that right now I am in Japan. So let's see if anything has changed. Okay, nothing seems to be has changed. It says device is roaming location, and the time has changed from 1500 to 1700 right now. Obviously that's not the time in Japan right now, but given scenarios, 2 hours behind. So side B is 2 hours behind. Yeah. So that's basically how device mobility really works. So if I go ahead and delete that information, IP address for example, this device info, and re-register, it should bring the time back to 1500. So as you can see, the time is now 1500 again. So that's pretty much how device mobility works. Very useful for especially when you have IP wireless phone you're taking with you, different locations you go to, or even IP communicator. Alright, so this is pretty much it for device mobility, and I will see you in the next lecture.